retrospective / tribute coming up in May with it's an evening of clips from Broadway and TV and film and radio with Imus, and of course my stint as one of the worst wrestling commentators of all time on Monday Night Raw. But trying to keep busy because when you're old, if you don't keep busy, you start rigor mortis sets in.
Yes. You got the RB studio. You're doing acting. You're doing coaching. I mean, you've got a lot on your plate. Crazy.
Yeah. It's like I said. It's a moving target's harder to hit. So, I'm not up for the fast-paced world of stand-up anymore. It's such a different business than it was back when I was doing it. And there's so much now that you can't do or say. It's kind of, although that probably wouldn't have been a bad idea back when I was doing Raw. If that was one of the restrictions, that might have helped. But
that's crazy. How? I'm not just curious. I guess we just start off right off the bat with how the heck did that even happen? How did you get in there? How did you start working for WWF as the Raw commentator?
It's the way the business works. You kind of fall into things through the back door for some reason. That's how I ended up on Broadway. It's how I ended up getting on Law and Order, and then Good Wife and Elementary, and it's just weird that it's, I guess, being in the right place at the right time, knowing the right people, or in the case of the WWF, as it was in those days, in the wrong place at the right time. I was doing a benefit for Connecticut Special Olympics. I did 31 years as a writer and a performer, doing characters and stuff on the Imus in the morning show. And we were simulcast on MSNBC for a long time. And then we were simulcast for a brief time on RFD. It was us and like cattle auctions were the programming, basically. And I'm not joking. Us, cattle auctions, and polka shows. And then eventually Fox Business picked us up. And so we were there for a while. But I was with him when he was still back at WNBC. And then when we moved to WFAN. And then after the firing from the quote unquote, as we like to call it, the incident, we moved over to Fox and ABC, WABC. And Imus was very involved in Connecticut Special Olympics because one of his best friends, Mike Lupica, his wife Taylor, was really involved in Connecticut Special Olympics. She used to chair a lot of the things, and she would do a lot of fundraisers. And Imus would always attend, and he'd always ask if I would join him, and so they kind of depended on me to provide the entertainment. And more often than not, I was an auctioneer at these charity events. And I had this great strategy where I would get these rich Wall Street guys bidding on one item against each other. And then I would go to whoever donated the item and plead them to maybe be generous enough to donate a second one. And then that way, each guy could get it for whatever the last bid was. And they would double so I made a lot of money for them, which was great. The only time I kind of backfired was when I did one for, I think it was Big Brothers, Big Sisters. And Donald Trump was in the audience. But it was the same night that Bill Clinton was a surprise guest speaker. And Trump already was not in a good mood because he immediately was no longer the most important person in the room. But then when I did the auction, he donated a foursome of golf with him on his golf course. And again, got two Wall Street guys bidding against each other. And I did say, Mr. Trump, would you mind adding another one? And he was not happy with that. He was not happy with me. I got a picture of him with Bill Clinton talking to me and Trump in the back. He's just beside himself. Anyway, just little anecdotal things trying to make this story a lot more interesting than it really is. I was doing this benefit. It was a dinner in some tent up in Connecticut. I think it was Stamford, 500 people. And I was emceeing and doing the auction, and Vince McMahon and his wife were sitting at the front table. And Vince was wearing a 3-piece peach-colored velour tuxedo. And I must have done about 20 minutes on just what he was wearing. Just murdered him, and the crowd went wild. Um, and so everything was fine, whatever. And a couple of days later, I'm driving home from the radio, and Amos's assistant calls and said, Vince McMahon just called the office. He wants to speak to you. I was, oh no, that's it. He's putting a hit out on me. And so I call him back and he says, Bartlett, how would you like to be on live television? I'm doing this new show called Monday Night Raw, and I think you might be able to be a good part of it. I want it to be irreverent. I want it to be on the edge. I want it to be, dangerous. You're very good spontaneously. I said, sure. My son at the time, I guess, was 8 or 9, and he was totally into wrestling. I didn't really know much about it other than I took Sean to see Randy and Miss Elizabeth get married at that event.
Yep.
And I said, yeah, and showed up a couple of weeks later up in Stanford. And I met with Vince and Randy Savage. And we kind of had like a little bit of a meeting. And then we started doing these mock trial runs with tape, how it was going to go. And it looked like it could be an interesting mix, and I guess it seemed like a good idea at the time because as has been oft noted and many times repeated, it was not the greatest thing I've ever done in terms of, and I think part of the problem with that was, although it might have been a good idea if somebody as an outsider come in to provide a different perspective, it's kind of hard to be funny when, even though it's really, really serious, the what you're making fun of is already larger than life. It's like putting a hat on a hat. So it didn't really make sense because the kind of humor that they did was very different than the kind of humor I did. And, humor, quote unquote humor, depends on your point of view. And so what I was doing, although in theory it was a good idea, talk about what was going on in current events and stuff like that. It just didn't, it was like trying to, shove a square peg in a round hole. It just really, really didn't fit. And, Randy could not have been nicer, more welcoming, more giving, more supportive, just a sweetheart of a man, just a real true gentleman, a total pro. Same thing with Bobby Heenan when I worked with him that one night when I imitated Vince and met him, at some of the shows, especially the first show when he dressed up like my aunt and my rabbi, because Vince for some reason thought I was Jewish. I don't know why. And Kevin Dunn, the producer, just totally wonderful, like salt of the earth, cream of the crop kind of people. Really just total pros, very supportive, would go out of their way to do anything to try and help me along and make it work. But it was like, moving the boulder up the hill, you get it on the top and just when you think, it just rolls back down again. So
how was Vince though? Like when you were making fun of him, does he like take it in? Does he laugh? Does he not like it?
I don't think Vince has a great sense of humor about himself. And as such, nobody ever dared to do that before. And this was kind of towards the end of my tenure with the organization. And at that point, I realized I really had nothing to lose. And when he was going to be absent one of the weeks to receive an award for the charity works, and, it's one of the reasons why I was at the Special Olympics, because there's no organization that does more for charity than the WWE, and back when they were the WWF. I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of charity work every single week. Everybody who's under contract with them is doing something at some children's hospitals, especially kids charities, really, really devoted. So he was getting an award for that. And Randy was going to go with him. And I guess he was going to present Vince with the award. And I think Hulk Hogan was chairing the event. Vince wasn't going to be there. And so I went to the makeup lady and I said, do you think you can make me look like Vince? And she got very excited, and I rented a tuxedo and got shoulder pads to put in so I could get the aircraft carrier shoulders like Vince. And she made my lips look really plump and slicked my hair back and darkened my eyebrows. And, I'd studied his posture and his movements and his voice and made fun of him. And everybody who worked for the organization loved it because nobody had dared to do it except Gorilla. Gorilla Monsoon was kind of bemused by the whole thing. I wasn't sure that he knew what was going on because my take was not to really say much as Vince, just kind of do that stream of consciousness stuff that he used to do. He just go run on, suplex, you got every third word, whatever he was saying, you never really understand what he's saying. And Gorilla got so pissed off by the end of it, but Brain loved it. Brain just loved it. And the following week, I showed up at the Manhattan Center and for the pre-show meeting, pre-production, and everybody was in the room, and everybody was looking at their shoes. Nobody was looking at me, and everyone was really quiet. And and usually the only quiet one in the room would be the Undertaker, because he would be in a corner of the room without his hat, squatting with his back against the wall, looking straight forward and not blinking until they announced him to go on, because he was getting into character, which I've never seen anything like that in my life before or since. And Vince comes in, and everyone just kind of looks over to me, and Vince goes, "Bartlett, you're fired!" Everybody has a big laugh. And the following week, or 2 weeks later, I end up interviewing Luna Vachon and Sensational Sherry, and they tear my clothes off. So it was his way of getting back at me. But I don't think he was none too pleased at the good-natured ribbing that I did. But even people who really, really hate me as a commentator still have a fun place in their heart for that one particular episode. It's my favorite episode of all the ones that I did.
That is great. Yeah, it is interesting, right? Because he's probably not used to somebody doing that. Everyone's usually kind of toeing the line with him.
Yeah.
What a wild world, right? Wrestling. I mean, you said, you weren't a fan, so when you get into it, it's probably nutty.
It was really intense. It was really a world unto its own. He created an incredible, I guess you'd call it IP now is the word. This organization is just enormous. The fans could not be more devoted, could not be more widespread, span the gamut of demographics. I'd be amazed by the people who would show up at the Manhattan Center. I mean, you'd have businessmen, Wall Street types, and then you'd have these kids, and then men and women and old and young. It was like this common denominator. It was, all of humanity in the same room. The wrestlers were all really interesting guys. I had a lot of respect for them because they're kind of like the dancers on Broadway in terms that they have to keep their bodies in the utmost of physical shape, because so much of what they do depends on that condition and the ability to perform, because that's what they do. I mean, it was a match, I forget which one it was, but it was one of the weeks, and it spanned through, I think, 3 or 4 commercial breaks. So it was a really, really long match. And Vince said, when we were away at a commercial, he said, "Can you believe this?" He said, "Look at this." He says, "Anybody who says it's fake doesn't know this side of it, that it really does take this kind of dedication." And it's one of the rare moments Vince and I had where I thought we had bonded, but, it never really happened.
What did you think about the Macho Man Randy Savage? How was he?
Just the greatest. I mean, really the greatest. The first time we met, he said, if you need to make fun of anybody, feel free to make fun of me. He said, I can take it. I can dish it out, but I can take it. And so I always felt I was respected by him. I respected him. I mean, I loved him. I thought he was just a great, great guy. And when the cameras came down, he'd stay a little bit in character, but when you got him in a quiet room and you actually talked to him, it's so weird. He's like almost gentle. You know what I mean? He's, for that tough exterior, and he was just a really kind gentleman, and just loved what he did and embraced it and gave 110%. Really did give 110%.
So you were at SummerSlam '91, where Macho Man and Elizabeth got married. So were you a fan at all, or really just your son's a fan? You never really were a fan, period.
Just my son, really. And I thought, one of the other ways that Vince got back at me to do for doing the impression was they were doing something at the Garden. And so I got my son, and he invited some of his friends. He was in middle school, I guess, at the time. I rented a limo. We took a limo into the city, and I just knew we were going to be sitting ringside, And we get our seats, and we're sitting 2 rows from the ceiling, Madison Square Garden. And I was on, he can't do this to me. It's in front of my kid. And he told all his friends. And so I went down to the dressing room, and I said, Vince, what's the story? He says, well, we're going to announce you. We're going to introduce you, and you're going to come down to the ring and interview Harvey Whippleman and Giant Gonzalez. But we want to watch the walk of shame with the spotlight and follow you all the way down from the top. So it was like going to be a bit. And okay, fine. Said, but you got to let my kids come backstage afterwards. I mean, yeah. So I don't go back to the seats, but they introduce me, and I go out and I do the interview in the ring with Giant Gonzalez, and Harvey's really busted on New Yorkers and how they're dirty and filthy and disgusting and awful people. And I'm trying to gain followers, after trying to hush the boos I was getting by saying New York is the center of the universe and it's the greatest city in the world. And I said something about Giant Gonzalez and how, the fur, the furry cut, whatever it was. I made some comment about the cut, and he gave me like a Spock pinch and drove me to my knees. And it was at that point I executed my famous finishing move, my official finishing move, which is running from the ring screaming in terror. But that was one of the ways that Vince was trying to get me back for the impression. But he's a genius. I mean, I've said this a number of times before. He is the P.T. Barnum of our age. He knows the product. He knows the audience. He knows what he's doing. And that's the reason why it's so successful. But he also happens to be a dick. He's a total dick. I mean, he's just impossible. He really is impossible. I mean, he could have offered me suggestions. He could have tried to do something, give me some advice, but he just kind of let me flounder, and figured that he'd kind of exploit that and make that, but it just never really worked. I mean, I had no problem being the whipping boy, if that was going to be the bit, that would be fine, because in my head I'm thinking, well, maybe I can turn it around and end up being a face, maybe treat me like a heel, and it turns into I'm trying to figure out ways that I could turn it around, but he really is just Iron Hand, man, Iron Hand, his way or the highway. And obviously it works, but we didn't really have the greatest rapport, I should say, because he's a dick.
It's interesting though. Like, he doesn't give you pre-production notes or like, hey, we're going here, say this, say that. He doesn't give you any of that.
He'd brief me. He'd let me know. He'd give me, and I was scrambling to find out something. I think I dressed up as Elvis one week just because I was so desperate to find something that was going to work. Because I had this idea that maybe I would turn it into, I was trying to get, what was it? Who was the Elvis character?
Honky Tonk Man?
Honky Tonk Man. I thought I could turn it into like I was, trying to get the Honky Tonk Man's gig. I figured it was because I had an idea it was going to go somewhere. No, I don't think it's going to work. We're going to have Doink the Clown hit you in the face with a pie. So about 2 minutes into the show, I'm in full Elvis regalia, and he smacks me in the face with a pie. So I spend the rest of the hour with, shaving cream on my face. So, he gave me about 30 seconds warning before the Luna Vachon Sensational Sherry interview, where they ripped my clothes off. At which, Randy really, we kind of like had a little improv thing going, he and I, because I ran, from the ring area backstage, and I tore my clothes a little bit more, and I had the makeup lady give me a black eye and mess up my hair, and give me a little blood in my nose, whatever. And I came back after we came back from the commercial break, and I was staggering, And then I kind of just collapsed, and Randy ran over and picked me up and slapped me in the face, trying to win. So it was like we had like some little bit together, which was fun. It was spontaneous, you know. And he stepped right up, but never really went anywhere, unfortunately. I mean, if I'd had a little bit of notice, I might have been able to figure out something that, you know, might have made sense. But it just was, it was, like I said, on paper, it made sense, but in the execution, it just didn't really work, you know.
Did you think you were going to last longer, like, or be there longer?
I'm surprised I lasted as long as I did, to be honest with you. And he made no attempt to tell me, you know, it wasn't working out, or that, you know, he didn't fire me. He didn't, you know, I decided I was the one who was going to leave. You know, I realized it had gone about as far as it was going to go, and there was no way that it was going to make it any better. And Kevin Dunn and I had about an hour-long phone call. He was trying to convince me to stay because he was trying to broaden the scope of the organization. He had me write a couple of pilot ideas to do some other kinds of programming. So I wrote a sitcom about a wrestling family called The Turnbuckles. And then I wrote kind of like a Saturday Night Live style show, sketch show, using the wrestlers as the actors in that. And so there were, you know, ideas in the pot. You know, I was cooking on some things that Kevin was very excited about, but you know, he's really, really disappointed. But again, to his credit, he understood and he respected me, and again, just a great guy, and just could not, you know, really thank him enough for everything that he did.
When you're looking at those projects, right? What happened to them? Are they just gone to the ether? They're just
yeah. I didn't even know if they were pitched to Vince, to be honest with you.
Oh,
because, you know, Kevin and I were kind of like, you know, tossing the ideas back and forth. I think I sent him a couple of pages with, you know, some sketch ideas, and one of the sketches I think was Yokozuna. I don't know, it was some car commercial. I don't remember what the car was for, but they would roll a ball bearing down, and the ball bearing would go around the hinges of where the hood was, and over the
Saab or whatever that was.
Yeah, whatever it was. And so I did it for, it was the 1994 Yokozuna. And I did it with Yokozuna, and the idea was it was going to roll around his body, you know, go around his nipples and down into his belly button, and then finally it was going to go around his back and then down the back of his diaper, basically. And he was going to stand up like he'd been shocked, and I was going to jump on his back, and he was going to run. You know, was one of the ones that I remember. And The Turnbuckles was like a sitcom about a family who lived in suburbia. You know, the bed in the bedroom was a ring. You know, an actual ring. They slept in the ring, and it was just a father and a mother, and kids were all professional wrestlers. But
it's a good idea. I like it.
Who knows? It might have been ahead or behind of its times.
Right. Yeah. True. That's interesting. Vince didn't try to keep you though, right? Or you? It was too late. You weren't going to go back.
I think he was relieved, to be honest with you, because it was clear it wasn't working out, and it had the potential to damage the franchise, you know, to tarnish the brand, you know, because everything else went so slick, you know, was so tightly paced and formatted, and I was something that was out of his control, really, and I don't think that was something he really liked. You know, he never really got used to. To his credit, he gave it a shot. But I think once he did it, he realized, what have I done? You know, I can't rein this guy in. He's not really doing what I thought he was going to do. And it's not working the way I thought it was going to work, you know? So, you know.
I do think they love having like a mainstream person or somebody outside of wrestling that they like, hey, this guy he's famous and he's a wrestling commentator. They love that stuff.
Right. And I think the key is to take it seriously, you know, and if that had been the way it had been described to me, I would have done that. But I thought my purpose was to be the outsider, to be the, you know, the fly in the ointments. But you can't have somebody on the outside infringe on something, like I said before, that's already over the top. You know, you can't you can have somebody who doesn't fit unless you can figure out a way to use them the right way, and I don't think that was ever established. I don't think any of us could figure out how my being different was going to work. I thought, like, for example, the first episode ever, I was calling him Yokozuna because that's what Mr. Fuji would say, even though it was wrong. And so, even the wrestling fans, when I've seen people do like, watch along podcasts and stuff on the internet, it's like, he doesn't even know the name. He doesn't even know Yokozuna's name. It's like, no, I'm making fun of Mr. Fuji, But of course, one of the first words out of my mouth is, that's one big butted Oriental, Vince. He's got an ass like an amphitheater. It's like at that point, there was, I think, if I watch it back, it's like this deathly pause. And then Vince kind of, well, I don't know about that, but I know about this. It's uncut. It's just, I think his sphincter kind of clenched after that. It was like, what have I done? It was pretty apparent from that early moment that it was not going to work.
But he did say uncooked, uncensored.
Of course.
Yeah, that's raw. Yeah,
that's the idea. I mean, which was a great idea. A great idea. I'm actually sorry that he couldn't find somebody who would have done better at it because, it would have been really popular, still. Oh, wait a minute. It is. More popular than it's ever been. I don't know. What's it up? Almost 30 years now, right?
WWF technically, well, the actual WWF was his father's and his grandfather's technically. So, right. I mean, they've been going on for 70-something years, but technically since Vince was in charge, 40 years, over 40 years now.
But Raw itself as a show has been.
I'm sorry. I think WWF, Raw itself, 32 years now. 32 years.
Jeez. God, I feel old.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
But
now they're on Netflix. Yeah.
I knew that I was not, I was kind of persona non grata. I've never been invited to any of the anniversary shows. Despite my by apologizing for how bad I was, and but it's for the best. They got something going, they got something good. Why screw it up with some fat unfunny bastard,
Well, and now they're on Netflix too, so now they can be really uncooked and uncensored and all that other stuff. Yeah,
right. Which we really couldn't do on USA. I mean, we could to a certain extent. I mean, more so than network, but there were certain things we could not, do or say, And then every Saturday I would watch Todd Pettengill and say, "I'm better than him. I mean, I got to be better than him." I would cringe watching Todd, but he lasted a lot longer than me.
For some reason, Vince loved Pettengill. He loved that kind of Saturday morning, I don't know, whatever you wanted, like host kind of guy.
I think because he did it for what it was. He was like, dad jokes weren't as offensive, to the brand in that kind of a format, obviously. But I don't know that he could have, spontaneously done some off the top of his head improving. But I just give a lot of credit to everyone who does that because of all the work it takes to pull it off. I mean, and also like the ring guys themselves and the referees and, all the talent liaisons and the makeup people and the costume people. I mean, it's an incredible organization. I mean, it's really impressive.
The camera guys, the guys that set up the ring. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. I mean, the camera guys. I remember when I was doing Vince, watching the camera guys behind the cameras, just trying not to laugh because I didn't want to be heard on the soundtrack,
Yeah, that's great. I don't know. That's to me awesome.
Interestingly enough, after I got beaten up by Sherry and Luna, that's when the kids started asking me for my autograph. The first time it had ever happened. So, but it didn't last very long. I think I was gone 2 weeks later.
They call it in wrestling like you're being ribbed, and basically kind of being pranked. That you could say, was that it, or was it almost like an initiation, or maybe even just really Vince payback?
I think initially it was initiation, and I think it was a part of it was an attempt to find something to do. Pranking me became kind of like the running storyline, which was fine. I just wish he had let me know a little bit early on what some of them were, and I could have added to them, or maybe come up with storylines that would have made it, or something that would have made it better or funnier or run more smoothly. But like surprising me, I think just kind of you miss a lot of shots that would have been really funny. At this point, I'm going to do a facial expression, so there should be a
Yep.
But it's hindsight's 2020. 32 years later, it's like, okay, get over it, Bartlett.
A very memorable time, though, especially the beginning of Raw. Considering it's like their flagship show for forever.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sorry I did it. I mean, it was a great experience in many, many, many ways. But even my son said, "You know what? I'd rather have you back home on Monday nights." So I think even he kind of knew it wasn't working out, and he was like in 7th grade. So
he wanted you out of there. Did you keep up with it all today or no?
He is back into it again. He's almost 40 years old, and for the past 10 years, he's hosted a SummerSlam party or one of the events. He hosts a party at a restaurant near his house for all his friends.
Nice.
I think they watch and they drinks and they have a pool and Royal Rumble. He does for the Royal Rumble.
Oh, okay, nice.
Year and interestingly enough, he has not asked me to attend one of them. So
wow, ouch.
I mean, part of it's like, why do you want to have your father show up at a party for your friends? But I feel like I could be a guest speaker. I can add a little bit of listening to it. But no, it's fine. It's fine. And I keep up with it through him, and of course now my granddaughter. He's got my granddaughter and my grandson. He's got them indoctrinated. She's got a babyface T-shirt, and the grandson Emmett's got a heel T-shirt. So they're very, very much into it. I don't think he showed them any of the Raw stuff yet. I think he's waiting to make sure that they're old enough to take it, so that he don't get as embarrassed as he has been, I think, throughout the years.
Yes, true. He's got to be careful, but he's got to invite you to one of the Rumble parties. It's like, hey, one of the first ever Raw announcers is here. My dad, he's got to do that. Come on. That'd be a great idea. That would be phenomenal.
Yeah, well,
I know.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry.
I like listening and watching a lot of the podcasts. And one of the first podcast interviews I ever did was from the old school wrestling guys over in Ireland. OSW. It's really involved in animation, and it's three guys from Dublin, I think. And Sean, my son, said, these guys were talking about you. I said, oh, really? And so I downloaded one of the things, and they were doing a watch along. And I don't know what language you can use on this, so I'll
go for it. Yeah.
Oh, go for it. Okay. So he watches it. And it's Monday Night Raw, and there's Bobby the Brain Heenan trying to get into the Manhattan Center, and he's dressed up. There's all these different people, and it says, oh, we get it. And now they're showing us the new team, the new hosts, the new commentators of the team. We have Vince McMahon, of course, and then we have Macho Man Randy Savage, and then who the fuck is this cunt? And I immediately fell in love with these guys, and I sent them an email, and I became a guest on their show, and it was just so much fun. I've done it. I've done a lot of these wrestling podcasts because I like being in front of the fans. There's no more loyal, dedicated fan of anything than that of professional wrestling fans. I mean, there's no Mets fan, Yankee fan, Cubs fan. Red Sox fan or Knicks fan. There's no sports fan that is as loyal or as avid and dedicated as the wrestling fans. They're the best. They're the greatest fans of any entertainment endeavor I've ever come in contact with. They're just, once they're in and they're there forever, and it becomes part of their life, part of their family practically, and it's really nice to get a chance to be in front of those kinds of people, to be seen by them,
crazy.
and also to offer my apologies for ruining one of their favorite things in the world.
It is crazy. Like if you're a fan, if you're in it, you don't even need to explain it. You're in it like that. It is what it is. If you're not in it, no explanation will do. It's like it's weird. But when you're in it for life. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that you will ever make it like a reappearance for WWE?
I mean, if they called and wanted me to come back in some kind of a capacity, even though, because I had thought it would be really funny if they brought me back with a long overdue apology statement, like almost like a press conference deal. So I would, apologize, and then, then they could throw eggs or something, something just so that everyone knows that I know how bad it was, and just be part of the fun. I mean, it could be fun, but I don't expect to get a phone call or an email anytime soon, unfortunately. But and it's probably for the best, I mean, I don't want to run the risk of tainting it again, to be honest with you, because again, it might seem like a good idea, and then when we go to do it, it's like, oh my God, we're going to do this again.
Right. But what about like a Hall of Fame appearance? They love putting celebrities in the Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? That'd be cool.
Yeah, I think the chances of me getting into the Wrestling Hall of Fame are about the same as me getting into like a size 29-inch waist pair of pants. So it just ain't going to happen. Nature won't allow that. If they have an annex, like a Hall of Shame, I'd be happy to be inducted into that. Another badge of honor, I would look at it. But it's like I said, I don't regret doing it. It was for all the times when it didn't work and felt uncomfortable, and it was just a great experience because, like I said, I met some of the best people in the world, some of the best people I've ever met in my professional career. Certainly, it was a great experience.
When you look back at it, like you kind of were saying, you would do it again, or you wouldn't do it again if you were back in time?
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's like, I don't think that if I had not started stand up when I did back in the late 70s, I don't think I would start now, because it's so different. I don't know, as going back into the wrestling world now would be any better for me than it was back then. I mean, I know I learned a lot. I kind of have a better sense of what to and not to do. But I don't know. I think that was kind of like lightning in a bottle at the time, and I don't know as it would even fit. If there was some kind of a way where somebody can make a case for it, it would be good because of this, and there was some planning involved that made sense, and not leaving so much of it up to chance. Because, I was just as guilty of this as anybody else. It's just thinking, oh yeah, it'll be fine. We'll just wing it. We'll just wing it. It'll take care of itself. We can't do that on national television. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. What was like your favorite part of doing it? Just if you could think of just, what was it? Sherry beating you up? I mean, what was your favorite part?
Well, there were high points. That was one of the high points. Doing Vince was definitely one of the high points. There was some, I gave Friar Ferguson his name. He was wrestling for the first time. I think it was my last show, to be honest with you. I gave Friar Ferguson his name. So I was happy to make my contribution to WWF history there. And some of the experiences with the guys, meeting Nature Boy and having him call me sir was unbelievable to me. You're calling me sir? It says you're wrestling royalty. And Randy and Bobby and Kevin and Bam Bam Bigelow. I loved him. He'd come to every show on a motorcycle. And he always brought along his wife and 3 children. I think none of them were above 2 years old. He was a real family man. The Steiner brothers, I remember coming over once and sitting on my lap, and one of them giving me a pinch of my Adam's apple, where I thought I was going to pass out. Razor Ramon breaking my chops backstage in the pre-production room. And of course, IcoPro bars. I miss those.
Vince has a lot of crazy ideas. IcoPro, the World Bodybuilding Federation. He had a lot of crazy ideas.
He's a man of ideas, and men of ideas have a lot of ideas, and some obviously are better than others, and some are genius. And sometimes even the genius ones don't take off. And sometimes the ones that don't appear to be any good or appear stupid end up being really popular. That's why it's good to have a lot of them. But he's got a really creative mind and a great head for business. So he knows, like I said, he knows the product, and he knows the consumer, and he knows the best way to get to them and give them what they want.
When you look at, sorry.
One of these days he'll make a pretty dollar. He'll make a beautiful dollar from this soon.
What do you think about Vince today, though? Although he's in a little bit of trouble, got a lot going on. Do you ever look or follow or think about what he's up to today?
I mean, he's always he's always been in trouble. Matter of fact, as I was leaving, he was involved in a really nasty something. So I kind of took that as a good reason to make my exit. He always seems like there's something going on, and part of that is because famous people, celebrities, are usually the targets of that kind of stuff. That's part of it, and the other part of it is he's a dick, John. He's a dick.
That is the word. That is.
It seems to be the consensus from what I understand.
Yeah, that seems to be. Yeah.
And after I left, I think Randy bailed. A lot of them went over to the WWE. I remember. A lot of them bailed. I think Hulk went first, and then Randy, and then there were a bunch of them that just kind of, they defected. So.
Yeah,
but,
WCW was taken over for a while from Vince.
WCW, right?
Had some hard times.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up with all the initials, but even that didn't stop him. And internationally, they're huge. I mean, between Japan and the UK, man, huge.
Yeah, they just went over to France this past year and were breaking records and all this other, financial upswings, just nuts.
I'd love to see French fans, so polite with their pinkies and their wine,
They were the loudest. They were doing the decibel level. They were like the loudest wrestling fans, though. Crazily enough,
I'm sure. And all the cigarette smoke must have been.
A lot of smoking over there, huh? I didn't know that.
Oh, the French are notorious. I mean, they start smoking when they're 6. They start drinking wine and smoking before they get out of elementary school.
Wow, jeez, too much over there. It's too crazy. But as far as you, I know we're talking so much about wrestling, though. But I know you had the podcast, right? You have what's the comedy, the five favorite funny films.
I was doing the Rob Bartlett Radio Comedy Hour. We started out, it was a live radio show in front of an audience. And it was kind of a combination of Saturday Night Live and like the old Jack Benny show where they would stand in front of microphones with scripts. And we did about 8 or 10 of those. And then we lost the venue. So we did it in a studio, just radio. And then they would simulcast it like an hour edited version on WABC. And then we lost the studio. And it wound up with me in my kitchen doing all the writing and all the voices and all the editing, and just became too much. So I segued into an interview show called 5 Favorite Funny Films, where I interview people about their favorite comedy movies and play clips and stuff like that. And now I'm working on starting one called 5 Fab 4 Faves, where people pick their 5 favorite Beatles songs and discuss them, the reasons why and whatnot. And so those are the 2 and maybe 3 podcasts that I'm going to be doing. And like I said, keep them busy.
What are the 5 favorite films? What are your 5 favorite funny films?
I think sometimes it changes. I think there's two for sure that will always be on it. Maybe 3. I mean, if I have to choose between Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein, because you should really only have one Mel Brooks, although it's really difficult to do, and producers. It's like that's the most difficult part. It's like choosing one Mel Brooks, choosing one Monty Python. Monty Python would probably be Holy Grail. If it's Mel Brooks, it would probably be. It's either producers or Young Frankenstein. I haven't really decided which one. But the original In-Laws with Peter Falk and Alan Arkin is one of the single funniest movies ever made. I laugh every single time I see it, and I must have seen it 50 times. No joke. It's just such great comedy. The performances are just so insane. And the story is just so crazy. And the chemistry between Peter Falk and Alan Arkin is just priceless, So those I think are 3 or 4. I don't know. Like I said, it changes. Interestingly enough, the one movie that seems to come up on a lot of people's lists is It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. And I don't know if it's because it's such an epic and it has all those comedians in it, but it was the original Rat Race. You remember the movie Rat Race from a few years ago? Similar thing where it just had this massive cast. But it's like 3 hours long. It's hard enough to keep a 90-minute comedy going. I don't know how they did a 3-hour comedy, but and I think A Hard Day's Night, the Beatles' A Hard Day's Night, it doesn't get as much credit for being a really funny movie as it deserves. I mean, some of that stuff is just priceless too. The throwaway lines in that movie are just, you can't. And again, it's all about the chemistry of those 4 together, and they hired really good people to surround them. Just people like that. The guy who played Paul's grandfather was a TV star over there in the British version of Sanford and Son. Actually, Sanford and Son was based on the show that they had written called Steptoe and Son, and this guy played the Sanford/Steptoe role, and he's just great. And Richard Lester is a terrific director. So,
what are the 5 best Beatles songs? What's your go-to for the Beatles?
That's a lot more difficult, I'd have to say, because there are so many different eras and there's so many different. I mean, I'd have a hard time picking a favorite song off each one of the albums. She Loves You is up there for sure. But there's some deep cuts I really like. Hey Bulldog, for some reason, I really have an affinity for. I don't know why. But there's just so many to choose from. And whenever I get into a discussion with somebody who says, what's the big deal about the Beatles? It's like, the hair in the back of my neck starts standing up. And it's like, I don't know if I can actually have a conversation with you if you're going to start off with that ridiculous point of view. It'd be like somebody saying wrestling is fake. It's what the Godfather would say. It's a family. So yeah, that's one of the impressions I should have done when I was on Raw. I should have done the Godfather.
Yeah,
that would have made a lot more sense.
30 years later, and you're thinking of this stuff. Is that crazy?
Virgil, why do you come to me with that?
What if that would have been great? Yeah, now you're thinking of it.
Yeah, now, of course. Right? 32 years later, right. Well, I'll come back. And be the Godfather.
There you go.
Yeah, in which case, all the stuff about you being a dick, I take back. So,
You know, it's crazy. My father-in-law the other day was mentioning to me, he's like, "Oh, because he's not a big Beatles guy for some reason." I was defending the Beatles, like, "Oh, come on, they're an all-time great. You know, you can't knock them." But he said that some of the cover songs by some of the other bands that he likes better than the Beatles, and he takes points off for that. I don't know if that's actually appropriate, or I don't know if you should be doing that.
I don't think it's too late to remove yourself from this family.
Yeah.
I think you can divorce your
Yeah.
parents up to a
Yes.
certain age, so you may
Yeah.
want to really consider that.
He was loving "Come Together" by Aerosmith. He was loving that version of it.
Not a bad cover. Not a bad cover. I actually saw Aerosmith do that in concert with Sean Lennon. He brought Sean Lennon out to do
Wow.
it with him
Awesome.
at the Garden. Good, but I'm sorry. You can't. You can't. I mean, just even the drum part of that. Ringo's drum part is just impeccable. You know?
What about "Live and Let Die" by Guns N' Roses? Do you like that version?
It's a different song. It's a different song. You know? Interpretations are not necessarily bad. I mean, it's a good cover. I don't think it's any better than McCartney's, but I mean, there are some Beatles songs I'm not a particular fan of. I wish they might have thought twice before they recorded them. "Run for Your Life" would be one of them. "Mr. Moonlight" would be another one. There are some missteps along the way, and there are some songs that they did after they broke up. In the solo years that I'm not an enormous fan of. Like, I'm not a huge "My Love" song fan. The McCartney's "My Love." And I kind of grew to like "Maybe I'm Amazed," but initially I wasn't that impressed by it. So many other things he did that I liked so much better. But so it's not like I just love everything, offhand, because it's the Beatles. For all
Right.
of you out there, just there's some things that I just take issue with.
I gotcha. So as we hit the wind down, we head towards the finish. Got to mention, "Can You Smell the Laughter?" A career retrospective and tribute at the Cinema Arts Center in Huntington, Long Island, Thursday, May 22nd. Tell us a little bit about it.
They do this program there, and it's a great little cinema where they do a lot of indie things and a lot of film festivals and stuff like that. It's an .org. It's a kind of a charity, non-for-profit. And they do something called stand-up sit-down, where Stephen Taub, who is the guy who came up with it, will get a stand-up comic to come in and do 20 minutes of his act, and then take a break, and then he will interview them afterwards about his career and whatnot. And so I did one back in March of last year, 2024, and went really well. We sold it out, and he's been wanting to have me back. But I've so lost my taste for stand-up. For many, many reasons. I don't get the same jolt from it that I used to, the same kind of joy. It's become much more like work. It's a lot more difficult. I don't really have any new material. And so I said, well, what if we did a thing where it was more like a retrospective of everything that you've done? Because you're not just a stand-up, you're an actor, you're a filmmaker, you've done voiceovers for cartoons. You've done, you were a wrestling commentator, and I've been very blessed. I mean, I had a pretty varied career over the years. And fortunately, because of the internet and my own personal collection, there's a lot of recordings of that kind of stuff, a lot of video. I found a video of me doing stand-up at Catch a Rising Star in the early 90s, and at Caroline's Comedy Hour, and Rosie O'Donnell's VH1 Stand-Up Spotlight. And then I found, clips from the different TV shows, the Good Wife and Ugly Betty and SVU and Elementary, and a couple of clips from the films I've done. All in Time was an indie movie that I did, which is really, really great little movie. And there's the odd clip here and there online from Raw, and to some YouTube snippets from when I did How to Succeed in Business on Broadway with Daniel Radcliffe, and The Odd Couple with Nathan Lane, and there's a whole bunch of that stuff. So I'm editing together like about a 25, 30-minute short, film, and we're going to run that, and then we're going to take questions from the audience. And then I think there's 4 or 5 comics who are going to be there, who at the end are going to roast me. So it should be a really, really fun evening. So as much of a tribute as it's going to be a bloodbath by the time it's over. All the goodwill that will have been engendered up to that point will be totally obliterated once these guys have gotten their way. And girls. There's going to be a couple of female comics there as well. So,
Nice.
but it's May 22nd at the Cinema Arts Center. I think it's Cinema Arts Center. I think it's RE instead of ER.org if you want to get tickets. I think it's not expensive. It's just, but it all goes to a great charity. They're a great organization. So I'm kind of looking forward to it. I was gonna call it "I'm Not Dead Yet," because people always think, "Oh no, he's got some terminal disease. That's why they're doing a tribute and career retrospective." At least I don't know. I mean, I could go to the doctor between now and then, and it would turn into that, but at the moment, it's not. So hopefully, which is good because then I get to be around for my own tribute instead of
Thankfully, thank God, yeah.
What good is that? That's why I've told everyone I want to hear my eulogy before I die, so I get to at least edit it.
Good point. I like that. Yes. So where can everybody find and follow you, and even your studio, the RB Studio?
It's the rbstudio.com. It's what I do is I teach acting classes live. I just finished one at here in town in Farmingdale at the library, and I'm doing another one for adult ed. But I also do it online. A couple of my students don't even live in this country. I have one of my best students actually is in Belfast. And every week we spend about an hour or so online on Zoom to work on monologues and scenes and whatnot. And I've been with him, I guess, 6 years now. And he's really, really terrific actor and started to actually get some auditions and land some gigs, and I coach. I do coaching. Like if people have an audition coming up, either for a part for community theater or an off-Broadway or Broadway thing. I work with a lot of Broadway. Some of the people I actually worked with on Broadway, I coach for other auditions. And kids who are going to be going to college and want to get into the theater programs, they have to do auditions. And so I work with them online as well. So it's been a lot of fun. I really enjoy that. And I also find that I've learned a lot from teaching them. I'm reminded of the things. And it's no one particular method that I use. I kind of borrow from all of them, depending on what I find works in the moment. So it's a kind of an amalgam of, Meisner method and the Chelik technique and Lee Strasberg and then my own little thing, which I call the open frame, where it just kind of relies on your own imagination and coming up with a history for the character you're going to play. Because when you're doing an acting part, you're part of telling a story, but you got to remember that each person in that story has their own story, and so to create that character story is the greatest way of making it be real and authentic and believable to an audience. So yeah, so that's, like I said, I'm keeping busy, waiting for that phone call from Vince.
You will be back in WWE someday.
All is